What if I told you that somewhere, carved into stone older than any empire you were taught to name, there exists a calendar that does not count forward from birth, but backward from annihilation? Not toward creation, toward ending. Imagine standing in the ruins of a city so ancient that even its name has been worn smooth by wind and forgetting. The air hums softly with heat. The ground beneath your feet is layered with civilizations, one built upon the bones of another, upon another still. And there, half buried in dust that was once a temple wall, you find it. A calendar etched in stone. But the numbers don't ascend. They descend. They count down. Not from the founding of a dynasty or the birth of a king, but from something else entirely. From a moment when the world, as they knew it, ended. This is not myth. This is not speculation whispered in the margins of fringe archaeology. This is carved, deliberate, repeated across continents and millennia. A pattern so persistent that to call it coincidence would be to close your eyes against the sun. We are taught that calendars mark beginnings. The birth of a savior, the founding of a city, the coronation of a ruler. We count forward because we believe in progress, in the accumulation of time as if it were wealth. But what if the ancients understood something we have forgotten? What if they knew that time is not a ladder climbing toward the stars, but a spiral circling back toward the center, toward the 0 point, toward the moment when everything must be reset? If you're drawn to the kind of history that breathes in the dark spaces between what we're told and what remains unspoken, consider staying with us. Press like if you're ready to question the shape of time itself. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? What hour is it where you are, as we begin to count backward together? Let me take you to Mesoamerica first, to the jungles where the Maya built pyramids aligned so precisely with the stars that even modern astronomers pause in something close to reverence. The Maya did not have one calendar. They had many. The Tzolk'in, sacred and cyclical, 260 days turning like a wheel. The Hab, solar and practical, 365 days to track the harvest. But there was another, the long count, and this one was different. The long count did not cycle endlessly like the others. It had a beginning, a fixed point in time that scholars have back-calculated to correspond, roughly, to August 11th, 3114 BCE. But here is what unsettles. The Maya did not describe this date as the creation of the world. They described it as the end of the previous world, the completion of the last cycle, the destruction that cleared the way for this age to begin. They were counting forward, yes, but they were counting forward from an ending. And they knew, with a precision that feels almost unbearable, when the next ending would come. December 21st, 2012. You remember the panic, the mockery, the t-shirts sold in airport kiosks. The world did not end, they said. The Maya were wrong. But were they counting toward apocalypse or toward reset? Toward destruction or toward the 0 point from which all things could begin again? The long count was not a countdown to oblivion. It was a countdown to transformation, to the moment when the cosmic odometer rolls over and the cycle begins anew. But to build such a calendar, to carve it into stone with such certainty, requires something more than faith. It requires memory. Memory of a time when the world did end. When the sky fell or the waters rose or the earth itself opened and swallowed cities whole. And it requires the knowledge that it will happen again. Look at their inscriptions. Look at the glyphs that speak of previous worlds. 4 of them, some texts say, each destroyed in turn. By jaguars, by wind, by fire, by flood. The current world, our world, is the 5th. And it too is marked for ending. Not as punishment, not as divine wrath, but as the natural rhythm of existence. The inhale and exhale of the cosmos. This is not unique to the Maya. Turn west, across the Pacific, to the cultures of Mesoamerica's northern neighbors. The Aztecs inherited much from those who came before them, the Toltecs, the Teotihuacanos, civilizations whose origins blur into legend. And they too spoke of 5 suns, 5 ages of the world, 5 creations and 5 destructions. We live, they said, in the age of the 5th sun, the sun of movement, the sun of earthquake. 2 will end, not if, when. Their calendar stone, the massive disk of carved basalt now housed behind glass in Mexico City, is often called the Aztec calendar. But it is not merely a calendar. It is a cosmological map. At its center, the face of Tonatiuh, the sun god, tongue extended, demanding sacrifice. Around him, the symbols of the 4 previous suns, the 4 previous worlds, each annihilated in turn. And surrounding all of it, the day signs, the month signs, the intricate gearing of time itself. But notice this. The calendar does not celebrate the present. It memorializes the past destructions and anticipates the future one. It is a monument to impermanence, to the idea that all things, no matter how mighty, will return to zero. Why would a civilization at the height of its power build such a thing? Why would they place, at the very heart of their capital, a stone that whispers constantly of ending? Unless they had seen it before. Let us cross the ocean now. Let us leave the jungles and pyramids of the Americas and travel to the ancient Near East, to the cradle of what we call civilization, to Mesopotamia, to Sumer, to Babylon. Here, too, we find calendars that do not begin with triumph, but with catastrophe. The Babylonians inherited their timekeeping from the Sumerians, and the Sumerians claimed they inherited it from the gods. From the Anunnaki, who came down from the heavens and taught humanity the secrets of number and star and season. But leave the gods aside for a moment. Look only at what remains. The tablets, the king lists, the astronomical records stretching back thousands of years with an accuracy that modern science has only recently been able to verify. The Babylonian calendar was lunisolar, balancing the cycles of the moon with the journey of the sun. 12 months of 29 or 30 days. Intercalary months added to keep the seasons aligned. It was practical, functional, sophisticated. But embedded within it was something older. Something that pointed not forward, but backward. Toward a flood. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in existence, tells of Utnapishtim, the man who survived the deluge. The gods, angered or capricious or simply weary of human noise, decided to destroy the world with water. But one god, Ea, whispered a warning. Utnapishtim built a boat. He sealed it with bitumen. He brought aboard his family, the craftsmen, the animals. And when the rains came, when the waters rose for 6 days and 6 nights until even the gods cowered in fear, he survived. When the flood receded, Utnapishtim made sacrifice. The gods, smelling the sweet savor, gathered like flies, and they granted him immortality, not as reward, as remembrance. He became the keeper of the memory of the world that drowned. But here is the question that sleeps between the lines of that ancient epic. If the flood was mythological, why does every king list, every chronology, every genealogy in Mesopotamia divide itself into 2 epochs? Before the flood, and after. The Sumerian king list, inscribed in cuneiform on clay, names kings who ruled for impossible spans, tens of thousands of years. Scholars dismiss these as mythological, symbolic, exaggerated. But then comes the line, then the flood swept over. And after that line, the rains become shorter. Hundreds of years, then decades, then lifespans we might recognize as almost human. It is as though time itself was reset, as though the flood marked year 0. Not the beginning of time, but the beginning of this time. The beginning of the world after the world that ended. The Babylonians did not celebrate New Year in January, as we do now in our inherited Roman calendar. They celebrated it in the spring, during the festival of Akitu. And this was not merely a festival of renewal. It was a ritual of recreation. For 12 days, the king would ritually humble himself, symbolically die, and be reborn. The priests would recite the Enuma Elish, the creation epic, in which Marduk slays Tiamat, the chaos dragon, and from her body fashions the cosmos. But listen closely to the ritual. It does not celebrate creation as a singular past event. It reenacts it. It makes it present. Because creation, in their understanding, was not something that happened once long ago. It was something that had to happen again and again. Every year, every cycle, every return to zero. The Akitu festival was a countdown and a reset. A symbolic end of the world and a beginning again. The cosmic order had to be renewed, or it would collapse. Time had to be rewound, restarted, or it would run down into chaos. If you're still with me, if you feel the pull of this ancient pattern, stay close. We're only beginning to see how deep the spiral goes. And if this resonates with something you felt but never named, consider subscribing. We walk this path together, those of us who remember that forgetting is a choice. Now travel further east, to the Indus Valley, to the civilization that built Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, cities of baked brick and sophisticated drainage, cities that flourished 4,000 years ago and then, for reasons still debated, simply ended. We have no deciphered script from them, no king lists, no epics, but we have their seals, their weights, their obsessive standardization. And we have the inheritors of their culture, the Vedic people of ancient India. The Vedic understanding of time is not linear. It is cyclical, vast, dizzying in its scale. They speak of yugas, ages of the world measured not in centuries but in hundreds of thousands of years. For yugas comprise a Mahayuga, Krita, Trita, Dvapara, Kali. And we are living, they say, in the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, the final age of the cycle, the age when truth is forgotten, when dharma collapses, when humanity degenerates. But the Kali Yuga is not permanent. Too will end. And when it does, the cycle will reset. The Krita Yuga, the golden age, will return. Not as something new, as something restored, as a return to the beginning. And how do they mark the beginning of the Kali Yuga? They date it, with astonishing precision, to the death of Krishna, which traditional chronology places at 3102 BCE. Within a few decades of the Mayan long count's starting point. Within the same historical horizon as the Sumerian king list's antediluvian dynasties. Coincidence? Or memory? Memory of a global event so catastrophic that every surviving culture carved it into stone, wove it into myth, built their calendars around its shadow? Consider the Hindu cosmology more deeply. Each Mahayuga lasts 4.32 million years. 1,000 Mahayugas comprise a kalpa, a single day of Brahma. And Brahma's life is 100 years of such days. The universe is created, sustained, and destroyed in cycles so immense that the human mind can barely conceive them. But at the end of each cycle, dissolution comes. Pralaya, the cosmic night, when all things return to the unmanifest, to zero, and then, after the dissolution, creation again. Not a new creation, a recreation. The same forms, the same souls, the same stories playing out again. Eternal return. This is not pessimism. This is not nihilism. It is the recognition that time is not an arrow flying forward into the unknown. Time is a wheel, and the wheel must turn. Let us move north now into Europe. Into the lands of the Celts, the Norse, the peoples who built Stonehenge and Newgrange and aligned their monuments with such precision to the solstices that we still gather there, millennia later, to watch the light pierce the darkness. The Celts did not write down their calendars in the way the Babylonians or Maya did. Their knowledge was oral, guarded by the Druids, transmitted in secret through memory and ritual. But fragments survive. The Coligny calendar, discovered in France, inscribed on bronze tablets, is one such fragment. It is a lunisolar calendar, sophisticated, spanning 5 years. But it is also deeply ritualistic. Certain months are marked as good, others as not good. Time was not neutral. Time was charged with power, with danger, with the thin places where the veil between worlds wore thin. The Celtic year was divided by 4 great fire festivals: Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, Lugnasad. These were not arbitrary. They marked the hinge points of the agricultural cycle, yes, but also something deeper. Samhain, the beginning of winter, was also the Celtic New Year. But it was a new year born from death, from the harvest's end, from the moment when the cattle were slaughtered and the fields went fallow and the world descended into darkness. Samhain was when the dead walked, when the boundary between this world and the other world dissolved, when time itself became liminal, and the rituals performed on that night were not celebrations. They were protections, wards against chaos, against the return of the forces that had once destroyed the world and might do so again. The Norse, too, understood time as cyclical and apocalyptic. Their cosmology is recorded in the Eddas, poetic and prose texts compiled in medieval Iceland but preserving far older traditions. They spoke of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the end of the world. Ragnarok is not vague. It is described with chilling specificity. The sun will be swallowed by a wolf. The stars will vanish from the sky. The earth will shake. Mountains will crumble. The seas will rise. Fenrir, the great wolf, will break his chains. The serpent Jormungandr will rise from the ocean. The gods themselves, Odin, Thor, Freyr, will march to battle and they will die. But here is what matters. After Ragnarok, after the destruction, the world does not end permanently. It is reborn. The earth rises from the sea, green and fertile. Two humans, Lif and Lifrasir, emerge from hiding. The cycle begins again. The Norse knew that the world had ended before, and they knew it would end again, and they built their understanding of time around that knowledge. Stonehenge, Newgrange, Avebury. These monuments were not simply tombs or temples. They were calendars, massive, enduring, built to track the movements of sun and moon with an accuracy that required generations of observation, of record-keeping, of transmission. But why invest so much effort, so much labor, so many human lives into tracking time? Because time was not abstract. Time was survival. Time was the knowledge of when the world had ended before and when it might end again. Newgrange, in Ireland, older than the pyramids of Egypt, is aligned so precisely to the winter solstice that on that single morning, light penetrates the long passage and illuminates the inner chamber. For 17 minutes, the dead are bathed in light. For 17 minutes, the darkest moment of the year is pierced by brilliance. And then the light fades, the chamber returns to darkness, and the world continues turning toward the next solstice, the next return, the next 0 point. These monuments are not simply ancient. They are memories made stone. Memories of a time when the sun did not return, when the winter stretched too long, when the world grew cold and dark and humanity huddled in caves and wondered if spring would ever come again. The Younger Dryas, 12,800 years ago, the world was emerging from the last ice age. The glaciers were retreating. The climate was warming. And then, abruptly, it reversed. Global temperatures plummeted. The cold returned. For more than 1,000 years, the world was locked in a climatic catastrophe that geologists still struggle to fully explain. Some evidence suggests a comet impact, a fragment of a larger body, disintegrating in the atmosphere or striking the ice sheets, triggering wildfires, floods, and a nuclear winter effect. Other evidence suggests massive volcanic eruptions or a sudden collapse of ocean currents. Whatever the cause, the effect was undeniable. Civilizations that were emerging, that were beginning to build, to settle, to farm, were destroyed. And those who survived remembered. They remembered the cold, the darkness, the death of the world. And when they rebuilt, when they created new cultures, new languages, new monuments, they built them around the memory of ending. They created calendars that counted backward from catastrophe. They carved warnings into stone. They encoded the knowledge of cosmic cycles into myth and ritual, so that future generations would not be caught unaware. Pause here if you need to. Let the weight of this settle. We're walking through the ruins of memory itself, and the journey is long. If you're finding something here you didn't expect, something that resonates with a knowing you can't quite name, stay with us. Let the algorithm know you're here. Let it carry this to others who are searching as you are. The Aboriginal Australians, the oldest continuous culture on Earth, speak of the dream time. Time before time. A time when the ancestral beings shaped the land, sang the world into existence, and laid down the law. But the dream time is not simply the past. It is ever present. It is accessible through ritual, through song, through the walking of the song lines that crisscross the continent. But the dream time also contains stories of catastrophe, of great floods that covered the land, of fires that consumed the world, of stars falling from the sky. And geologists studying Aboriginal oral traditions have confirmed that some of these stories describe real events. The flooding of coastal areas at the end of the Ice Age, the eruption of ancient volcanoes, the impact craters left by meteorites. The Aboriginal people encoded their history, their warnings, into song. And those songs have been sung, unbroken, for tens of thousands of years. They are the longest continuous archive of human memory. And they speak again and again of the world ending and beginning anew. Now we turn to a place that might surprise you. Not ancient, not lost, but very much alive. The Hebrew calendar. Still in use today. Still marking the rhythm of Jewish life, Jewish ritual, Jewish identity. But look at it closely, because this calendar, too, counts backward from creation. Or does it? The Hebrew calendar dates the creation of the world to the year 3761 BCE. Scholars arrived at this date through careful reading of the genealogies in the Torah, counting backward from known historical events to the 6 days of creation described in Genesis. And by this calendar, we are now living in the year 5785, nearly 6,000 years since the beginning. But the beginning of what? Genesis does not describe the creation of matter ex nihilo, from absolute nothingness. The Hebrew phrase is tohu vavohu, formless and void. The earth was already there. It was simply chaotic, dark, covered with water, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep. What Genesis describes is not creation from nothing, but creation from chaos. The imposition of order, the separation of light from darkness, water from land, firmament from abyss. It describes a reset. And the flood of Noah, recorded in Genesis but echoing the much older Mesopotamian flood myths, is another reset. The world does not begin with Adam. It begins again with Noah. 8 souls. One family. The sole survivors of a cataclysm that drowned the world. And from them, according to the text, all nations descended. The Hebrew calendar marks time from this recreation. But embedded within the tradition is the understanding that there were worlds before this one. The Talmud and Kabbalistic texts speak of the Shemitah, cosmic cycles lasting 7,000 years each. Some traditions suggest that our world is not the first, but the latest in a series of creations and destructions. That God created worlds and destroyed them, again and again until this one, perhaps, proved stable. The 7th day is the Sabbath, the day of rest. But the Sabbath is not only a day. It is a reflection of cosmic structure. 6 days of creation, one of rest. 6 millennia of history, one of messianic peace. And after 7 cycles? Jubilee. Release. Return to zero. All debts forgiven. All slaves freed. The land returns to its original owners. Time itself is reset. This is not linear progress. This is cyclical restoration. Consider the Christian tradition that grew from Jewish roots. The Book of Revelation, written in the 1st century CE, describes the end of the world in apocalyptic detail. The 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls of wrath, the beast, the dragon, the whore of Babylon, the final battle, Armageddon, the destruction of the old heaven and old earth, and then the creation of the new. But notice, it is not a different creation. It is a renewed creation. The new Jerusalem descends from heaven. The tree of life, which stood in Eden at the beginning, is restored. The river of life flows again. The curse is lifted. The paradise that was lost is regained. Revelation is not describing something unprecedented. It is describing a return. Cosmic return to zero, to the garden, to the beginning before the fall. The early Christians expected this imminently. Paul wrote as though the end would come within his lifetime. The church organized itself around the expectation of Christ's imminent return. But the years became decades, the decades centuries, and the return did not come. So the church adjusted. It spiritualized. It institutionalized. But the calendar remained. The liturgical year, cycling endlessly. Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Easter, Pentecost. Birth, death, resurrection. Ending and beginning. Every year a microcosm of the cosmic cycle. And even our secular calendar, the one most of the world uses now, is a countdown. We call it Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. We are counting forward from the birth of Christ. But the birth of Christ, in Christian theology, is the moment when God became human to redeem a fallen world, to undo the curse of Eden, to reset the relationship between humanity and divinity. We are counting forward from a reset. Do you see the pattern now? Do you see how it repeats, culture after culture, millennium after millennium? The calendar that counts backward. The calendar that begins at an ending. The calendar that remembers catastrophe and anticipates return. If you see it, if you feel the spiral tightening, let me know. Leave a word, a symbol, a sign that you're walking this path with us. We're not meant to walk it alone. Let us turn now to the sky, because the ancients did not look only at the earth for their calendars. They looked up, and what they saw terrified and awed them in equal measure. The precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the earth's axis, like a spinning top winding down. It takes 25,920 years for the axis to complete one full cycle. This is the great year, the Platonic year. And as the axis shifts, the position of the stars shifts. The pole star changes. The constellations at the spring equinox shift through the zodiac. Right now, we are leaving the age of Pisces and entering the age of Aquarius. Each age lasts roughly 2,160 years. Before Pisces was Aries. Before Aries, Taurus. Before Taurus, Gemini. The ancients knew this. The Egyptians oriented the pyramids not to the current pole star, but to Thuban, the pole star of their era. The Sphinx, some researchers argue, may originally have been a lion, built when the spring equinox was in Leo, nearly 13,000 years ago, during the last great cataclysm, the Younger Dryas. The Babylonians tracked the precession with exquisite precision. The Maya encoded it into their long count. The Vedic texts describe it in terms of the cosmic breath of Brahma, the inhalation and exhalation that marks the rise and fall of ages. But here is what unsettles. The precession is a clock, a cosmic clock, and it is counting down, not to an arbitrary point, but to the moment when the cycle completes, when the great year ends and begins again, when the sky returns to its starting position, when the cosmic odometer rolls over to zero. And at certain points in this cycle, the stress on the Earth system increases. Axial shifts can trigger climate instability, volcanic eruptions, seismic activity. Some researchers have proposed that the great catastrophes of human history, the Younger Dryas, the Bronze Age collapse, the fall of Rome, even the modern climate crisis, are not random but cyclical, that they correspond to specific points in the precessional cycle. The ancients knew this. They built their calendars around it. They oriented their temples, their pyramids, their monuments to track it, because they understood that time is not neutral. Time is a force, and at certain moments, time becomes dangerous. There is a temple in Egypt that few tourists visit. Dendera. It stands on the west bank of the Nile, its walls covered in hieroglyphs, its ceilings painted with stars. And in one chamber, carved into the ceiling, is a zodiac. A circular zodiac showing the 12 constellations, the planets, the decans. It is called the Dendera zodiac, and it is one of the most complete representations of ancient Egyptian astronomical knowledge. But the zodiac at Dendera is strange. The constellations are not in the positions they should be for the time when the temple was built, during the Ptolemaic period around 50 BCE. They are shifted, precessed, as though the carving is showing not the sky of that era, but the sky of an earlier time, or a future time, or perhaps both. Some scholars suggest the Dendera zodiac is a map of the precessional cycle, a calendar not of years, but of ages, a clock that measures time in thousands of years, tracking the slow turning of the cosmic wheel. And at the center of the zodiac, carved in stone, is a line, a crack, point of division, 0. The Egyptians had a concept they called Zep-Tepi, the first time, the golden age when the gods walked the earth, when Osiris ruled, when Ma'at, truth, balance, cosmic order, was perfect. But Zep-Tepi was not simply the distant past. It was the template, the pattern. And Egyptian kingship, Egyptian ritual, Egyptian civilization itself was understood as an attempt to maintain Ma'at, to prevent the world from sliding back into chaos, into Isfet. But chaos was always encroaching. The desert, the enemies, the internal decay. A pharaoh died, when a dynasty fell, when the Nile failed to flood, chaos surged. the world tipped toward zero. And only through ritual, through sacrifice, through the coronation of a new pharaoh, could balance be restored. The Egyptians were not building toward a future utopia. They were trying to prevent a return to the cataclysm. They were counting backward constantly from Zep-Tepi, measuring how far they had fallen, and hoping, through perfect memory and perfect ritual, to restore what had been lost. Look at their obsession with immortality. The pyramids, the tombs, the mummification. They were not simply preserving bodies. They were preserving memory, identity, the knowledge of who they had been, so that in the afterlife, in the do-it, the soul could be reconstituted, so that even death could be undone, so that time could be reversed. The Book of the Dead is not a guide to dying. It is a guide to undying, to navigating the underworld, to speaking the correct words, to passing the judgment of Ma'at, so that the soul can emerge again into light, into resurrection, into return. This is the pattern. Over and over, the world ends, the soul dies, and through knowledge, through ritual, through memory, it is restored. Let us move to South America, to Tiwanaku, the ruins near Lake Titicaca, high in the Andes. Tiwanaku was a great city, a ceremonial center, a hub of trade and culture. It flourished between 500 and 1000 CE, and then it collapsed. The reasons are debated: drought, invasion, internal strife. But the ruins remain, and carved into the stone is a calendar. The Gateway of the Sun, a massive stone arch, is covered in intricate carvings. At the center is a figure, often identified as Viracocha, the creator god. And surrounding him are rows of smaller figures, running toward him, holding staffs. They are not static. They are in motion. They are running. And scholars have interpreted these figures as a calendar, marking the cycles of the sun, the moon, the agricultural seasons. But there is another interpretation, that the figures are running toward the center, toward the moment of creation, toward zero. That the gateway of the sun is not marking time as a linear progression, but as a convergence, a countdown, a return to the origin point. Viracocha, in Andean mythology, is the creator who emerged from Lake Titicaca and shaped the world. But he is also the god who, when his creation was imperfect, destroyed it with a flood and began again. The myths speak of multiple creations, multiple destructions, of ages marked by different kinds of people, giants, primitives, failures, all swept away until the current age, the age of proper humanity, was established. But the current age is not final. Viracocha departed, walking across the ocean, but he promised to return. And when he returns, the world will change. The cycle will complete. This is not unique to Tiwanaku. The Inca, who came later, who conquered the Andes and built their empire on the foundations of older cultures, had a concept called Pachacuti. It means world reversal or turning of time. It referred both to a historical event, the founding of the Inca Empire, and to a cosmic principle. The idea that time itself periodically reverses, that the world ends and begins anew, that history is a spiral, not a line. And the Inca built their calendar around this understanding. They divided time into ages. The current age was the age of the Inca, the age of order and empire. But before it were ages of chaos, of darkness. And after it, perhaps, would come another reversal. Another Pachacuti. The Nazca lines, carved into the desert floor of southern Peru, are another mystery that touches on this theme. Massive geoglyphs, figures of animals, geometric shapes, lines stretching for miles. They are only fully visible from the air. Modern people, encountering them for the first time, asked, why would anyone create something that can only be seen from above? Unless they were meant to be seen by gods, or by visitors from the sky. But there is another interpretation, that the Nazca lines are a calendar, a massive, landscape-scale calendar that tracks the movements of sun and stars, that marks the solstices and equinoxes, that encodes astronomical knowledge into the earth itself. Some lines point to the rising sun at the winter solstice. Others align with certain stars at specific points in the precessional cycle. The Nazca were mapping time, not human time, cosmic time, the time of the gods, the time of the cycles that govern the rise and fall of civilizations, the time that brings the rains or withholds them, the time that decides whether the world continues or resets. If you're still here, still listening, still following this thread through the labyrinth of forgotten calendars, then this is not academic. This is not dry history. This is the memory encoded in our bones. And if it speaks to you, if it calls to you, then share this. Let others find their way here. Let the spiral widen. We must speak now of Göbekli Tepe, because Göbekli Tepe changes everything. In southeastern Turkey, on a barren hilltop, there stands a series of stone circles, massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing 20 tons, carved with intricate reliefs of animals, foxes, scorpions, vultures, serpents. The pillars are arranged in circles like Stonehenge but older, much older. Göbekli Tepe was built 11,600 years ago, before pottery, before writing, before agriculture, according to the conventional timeline. It predates the pyramids by 7,000 years, predates Stonehenge by 6,000. It is, by every measure, the oldest known monumental structure on Earth. And it was deliberately buried, not by natural erosion, not by catastrophe, but by human hands. The builders filled in the circles with rubble, covering them completely, and then walked away. Why? Some researchers suggest it was a ritualistic closing, a sealing, a way of marking the end of an era. The pillars at Göbekli Tepe are not aligned to the current stars. They are aligned to the stars as they were positioned 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Younger Dryas, at the moment when the world was emerging from cataclysm. Göbekli Tepe is a calendar, a monument to the end of the world, and to the survival of those who built it. Look at the carvings. The animals are not domestic. They are wild, dangerous, powerful. They are the animals of the Ice Age, the megafauna, the creatures that went extinct during the Younger Dryas. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were memorializing a lost world. They were carving into stone the memory of what had been destroyed, so that future generations would know, so that we would know. One pillar, Pillar 43, has garnered particular attention. It shows a vulture, a scorpion, and a circle that some interpret as the sun. The arrangement of symbols has been analyzed using archaeoastronomy, and a startling pattern emerges. The symbols correspond to constellations, specifically to the position of those constellations around 10,800 BCE, the exact time of the Younger Dryas impact event. Pillar 43 may be a record, a warning, a message carved in stone that says, "This happened. The sky fell. The world ended. Remember." And then the builders buried it. They sealed the memory into the earth. And for 11,000 years it slept. Why bury it? Why hide the knowledge? Perhaps because the knowledge was too dangerous, too painful. Perhaps because the survivors, traumatized by the cataclysm, wanted to forget. Or perhaps because they knew the cycle would return, that future generations would need to rediscover the warning, that the knowledge had to be hidden until the time was right. We are uncovering it now, in our time, at the cusp of another turning. Is that coincidence? The carbon dating of Göbekli Tepe forced archaeologists to reconsider the entire narrative of human development. If hunter-gatherers could build something this complex, this monumental, this astronomically aligned, then the neat categories we use, Stone Age, Bronze Age, Primitive and Advanced, collapse. The timeline blurs. And the possibility opens that perhaps there was knowledge before. Perhaps the people who built Göbekli Tepe were not primitives emerging from the darkness. Perhaps they were survivors, inheritors, rebuilders. Perhaps they were counting backward from an ending. Across the Mediterranean, in Malta, there are temples older than Göbekli Tepe. The Gantija temples, the Hagar Kim, the Najdra. Massive stone structures built between 3600 and 2500 BCE. They are oriented to the solstices. The passages flood with light at the equinoxes. And inside, archaeologists have found statues, corpulent female figures. Mother goddesses, they are called. Symbols of fertility, of abundance. But there is something else. The temples are aligned not only to the sun, but to the stars, to the constellation of the Pleiades, to Orion, to the Celestials. These temples were tracking the same cosmic cycles as the Maya, the Egyptians, the Sumerians. And then, abruptly, the culture that built them vanished. The islands were abandoned. The temples fell silent. No invasion. No conquest. The people simply left. Or died. And for 2,000 years, Malta was nearly empty. What happened? Climate change. Drought. Collapse of the agricultural base. The explanations are reasonable. But they are also familiar. Because this pattern repeats. A civilization rises. It builds monuments aligned to the stars. It tracks the cosmic cycles. It encodes knowledge into stone. And then it collapses. And the survivors, if there are survivors, start again from zero. Easter Island. Rapa Nui. The most isolated inhabited place on Earth. The people who lived there carved massive stone heads, the moai, and transported them across the island to face the sea. They built platforms ahu aligned to the solstices. They created a written script, rongo, that has never been deciphered. And then their civilization collapsed. The forests were cut down. The resources depleted. The population crashed. By the time Europeans arrived, the island was barren, the people few, the knowledge of how the moai were carved and moved almost entirely lost. But the moai remain, facing the horizon, watching for something, waiting for something. The oral traditions of Rapa Nui speak of the arrival of the first people, led by King Hotu Matue, who fled from a land that was sinking into the sea. A land called Hiva, a lost homeland, a place destroyed by rising waters or sinking land or cataclysm. The people of Rapa Nui were refugees, and they brought with them the memory of an ending. They built their calendar around the cycles of the stars. They held ceremonies at the solstices. They watched the horizon, because they knew, they remembered, the world had ended before, and it could end again. Let us pause here. Let the silence settle. If you're still listening, if you've followed this journey through civilizations that built their sense of time around catastrophe, then you're ready for the deepening. For the question that underlies all of this. Stay close. What if the purpose of a calendar is not to track time, but to prepare for its ending? Think about it. Why does a culture invest so much energy, so much labor, so many generations of accumulated knowledge, into building monuments that align with celestial events occurring once a year, or once a lifetime, or once in 26,000 years? Why carve warnings into stone? Why encode astronomical data into myth? Unless they knew, unless they had witnessed, unless the memory of catastrophe was so deep, so traumatic, so undeniable that everything they built, everything they passed down, was organized around the single purpose of ensuring that future generations would not be caught unaware. The calendar that counts backward is not pessimistic. It is preparatory. It is a tool for survival. Consider the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, dated to around 100 BCE, it is a bronze device of staggering complexity. Gears, dials, inscriptions. It was an analog computer, designed to calculate and display the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, to predict eclipses, to track the cycles of the Olympic Games. Modern reconstructions have revealed that it was even more sophisticated than initially understood. It tracked the metonic cycle, the 19-year period after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same days of the solar year. It tracked the Kallipic cycle, the Saros cycle for eclipse prediction. It was a calendar in mechanical form, a device for knowing when. But who built it? The Greeks were sophisticated, yes, but the Antikythera mechanism represents a level of engineering that should not have been possible with their known technology. It suggests the existence of a much older tradition of precision mechanics, of astronomical observation, of timekeeping that we have lost. The ancient Greeks themselves spoke of earlier golden ages. Hesiod, in Works and Days, described 5 ages of man. The Golden Age, when humans lived like gods, free from toil and suffering. The Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Heroic Age, and finally the Iron Age, the current age, the age of strife and decay. Each age was worse than the last, and each age ended in destruction. The implication is clear. We are living in the final age. The age that is winding down toward zero. And after this age, what? Another reset? Another return to gold? Or final annihilation? The Antikythera mechanism may have been a tool for tracking the cycles, for knowing where we are in the cosmic countdown, for calculating the moment when the age would end and the next would begin. Now consider the Dresden Codex. One of the few surviving Maya books, it is a bark paper manuscript covered in glyphs and numerical tables. Much of it is dedicated to astronomical observations, Venus cycles, eclipse prediction, the movements of Mars and Jupiter. But woven through it is something else: prophecy, divination, the knowledge of lucky and unlucky days, the times when the gods were favorable, the times when disaster loomed. The Dresden Codex is a calendar and a warning. It tells the reader not only when things will happen, but what kind of things. And it makes clear that time is not uniform. Some moments are charged with potential, others with danger. The Maya priests who used the Dresden Codex were not simply tracking time. They were navigating it. They were attempting to steer their civilization through the hazardous waters of cosmic cycles, to avoid the rocks, to reach the safe harbor of the next Khatun, the next Bakhtin, the next great cycle. But they failed. The Maya civilization collapsed. Not all at once, but in waves. The great cities of the southern lowlands, Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, were abandoned between 800 and 900 CE. The population crashed. The jungle reclaimed the pyramids. By the time the Spanish arrived, the Maya were fragmented, their knowledge scattered, their books burned. But the calendar remained, carved into stone, encoded in the surviving codices, passed down through oral tradition. And it is still used today by Maya communities to track the cycles, to hold ceremonies, to remember. What did they see coming? What did the calendar warn them of that they could not prevent? We do not know. But we know they counted backward. And we know they expected an ending. Let us turn to the most unsettling calendar of all. The modern one. Our calendar. The Gregorian calendar, adopted in 1582, reformed from the Julian calendar, which itself was reformed from earlier Roman systems. We count forward from the supposed birth year of Christ. We number our years in a line stretching back 2,000 years and forward indefinitely. But we are beginning to count backward again. Climate scientists speak of tipping points, of deadlines, of windows of opportunity that are closing. We have 10 years, they say, to prevent irreversible warming. We have crossed 1.5 degrees. We are approaching 2 degrees. The glaciers are melting. The sea levels are rising. The weather is becoming chaotic. We are creating calendars now that count down. Countdown clocks in city squares showing the time remaining until climate catastrophe. Apps that calculate your carbon footprint, your contribution to the countdown. Websites that track extinctions, deforestation, ocean acidification. All of them counting down. All of them measuring the time until zero. We have become, without quite realizing it, a civilization that counts time backward from destruction. And perhaps this is not new. Perhaps this is what we have always done. Perhaps every civilization, at its height, becomes aware of its own fragility, becomes conscious that the systems that sustain it, the climate, the crops, the rivers, the peace, are not eternal, that they can fail, that the world can end. And so they build calendars, not to celebrate, to prepare, to remember, to warn. If this resonates, if you feel the weight of it, then you understand. You're part of the remembering. And maybe that's why you're here, listening in the dark. While the world spins on, let others know. Let the circle widen. There is a theory, not widely accepted but persistent, that the Great Pyramid of Giza is not simply a tomb. That it is, in fact, a calendar. A three-dimensional astronomical instrument, encoding in its dimensions and angles a vast body of knowledge about the Earth, the solar system, and the precession of the equinoxes. The pyramid's alignment to true north is accurate to within 1/15 of a degree. Its base perimeter, when divided by twice its height, yields pi. The ratio of its height to the perimeter of its base is the same as the ratio of a circle's radius to its circumference. The internal passages align with specific stars: Sirius, Orion's belt, the pole star Thuban. Some researchers have argued that the dimensions of the pyramid encode the speed of light, the mean distance to the sun, the length of the solar year. that it is a mathematical and astronomical repository built to preserve knowledge across millennia. But why? Why encode knowledge in stone rather than in writing? Because writing can be burned. Libraries can be destroyed. Languages can be forgotten. But stone endures. And if you encode the knowledge correctly, if you make it simple enough and complex enough, if you hide it in plain sight, then it can survive even the collapse of the civilization that created it. The Great Pyramid, according to this theory, was built by a civilization that knew it was ending, that anticipated its own destruction, and that wanted to pass on its knowledge to whatever culture might come after. It is a time capsule, a message in a bottle, a calendar that counts backward from the moment it was built and forward to the moment when its secrets would be rediscovered. We are rediscovering them now, using lasers, drones, muon detectors, finding hidden chambers, passages, voids. Each discovery raises more questions. Who built it? When? Why? The orthodox answer is that it was built around 2560 BCE as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu. But no body has ever been found inside. No treasure. No inscriptions. Only empty chambers and enigmatic shafts and the silent, looming presence of the structure itself. What if the pyramid was not built by Khufu but claimed by him? What if it stood already ancient even in his time, and he simply appropriated it, added his name, his cult, his dynasty's legitimacy to something far older? This would explain the precision, the astronomical alignments, the mathematical sophistication. It would explain why the pyramid seems so different from every other Egyptian structure. Why it stands alone, an anomaly, a relic of a different time, a different purpose. It would mean that the pyramid is a calendar built by a civilization we have not yet named. A civilization that understood the cycles, that knew the world would end, and that built in stone a monument to time itself. Now consider the Sphinx. It sits beside the pyramid, gazing eastward, toward the sunrise. Its body is a lion. Its face, according to tradition, is the face of Khafre, the pharaoh. But the body and the head are out of proportion. The head is too small. The weathering on the body is far more extensive than the weathering on the head. Geologists examining the Sphinx have noted that the erosion patterns on its body are consistent with water weathering. Not wind and sand, which have sculpted the rest of the Giza Plateau, but rain. Heavy, sustained rainfall. The kind of rainfall that has not occurred in Egypt for thousands of years. Not since the end of the last ice age. Not since the Younger Dryas. If the Sphinx was carved when that rainfall was occurring, then it is not 4,500 years old. It is 12,000 years old. Or older. And if it is that old, then what was it originally? Before the head was recarved into a pharaoh's face? Some researchers suggest it was a lion. Completely. That it was built when the spring equinox was in the constellation of Leo, when the Sphinx would have faced its celestial counterpart, rising on the horizon at dawn. That would date the original Sphinx to approximately 10,500 BCE, the end of the Younger Dryas, the end of the last world, the 0 point. The Sphinx, like the pyramid, like Göbekli Tepe, like the Nazca lines, like the stone circles of Britain and the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, is a marker. A monument to a moment of ending and beginning, a calendar carved in stone. And we, standing before it now, are the inheritors of that calendar. We are the ones living in the time it was built to measure. We are approaching, perhaps, another 0 point, another turn of the great year, another reset. Do we have the knowledge to survive it? Look at what we have forgotten. Look at what we have lost. We do not know how the pyramids were built. We do not know how the Maya achieved their astronomical precision. We do not know how the Antikythera mechanism was made. We do not know what the Rongorongo script says. We do not know who built Göbekli Tepe or why they buried it. We are surrounded by the relics of lost knowledge. And we call them mysteries. We call them anomalies. We call them impossible. But they are not impossible. They existed. They were made. Which means the knowledge existed. The capability existed, and it was lost. Why? Because the civilizations that held it collapsed. Because the continuity was broken. Because catastrophe came, and the survivors did not have the luxury of preserving libraries or teaching schools or maintaining traditions. They had to survive. They had to eat. They had to rebuild. And in the process, the knowledge slipped away. We are doing the same now. We are losing knowledge. Languages die every year, carrying with them entire worldviews, entire bodies of oral tradition. Ecosystems collapse. Species go extinct. The old ways, the indigenous knowledge, the deep memory, it is eroding. And in a few more generations, it will be gone. And if catastrophe comes again, climate collapse, war, pandemic, asteroid impact, solar flare, what will we lose? What will the survivors forget? Everything in the cloud. Everything digital. Gone in an instant if the grid fails. And how many of us know how to rebuild? How to make fire without a match? How to navigate without GPS? How to grow food without industrial agriculture? We are as fragile as the Maya, as vulnerable as Easter Island, as dependent on systems we do not control as the Anatolian farmers who built Göbekli Tepe and then disappeared. And we are not building monuments to warn the future. We are building data centers, satellites, technologies that will decay, rust, crumble within decades. What will the archaeologists of the future find? What calendar will they read in our ruins? Perhaps none. Perhaps we will vanish without a trace, without a warning, without a memory. Or perhaps, if we are wise, we will build our own Göbekli Tepe, our own pyramid, our own calendar in stone. A message that says, we were here, we knew, we tried. Remember us, learn from us, do not make our mistakes. Let us speak now of the rituals, because the calendar alone is not enough. To count time is one thing. To sanctify it, to make it holy, to embed it in the rhythm of life and death and renewal, that is something else. The rituals that mark the 0 point, the ceremonies of return. The Babylonian Akitu festival, which we touched upon earlier, was not simply a celebration. It was a reenactment of cosmic order. For 12 days, the king would strip himself of his regalia, his symbols of power. He would be struck by a priest, humiliated, symbolically killed, and then, after confession, after atonement, he would be restored, crowned again, reborn. This was not theater. This was not metaphor. For the Babylonians, the ritual was the reality. The king's death and rebirth was the world's death and rebirth. If the ritual was performed correctly, the crops would grow. The river would flood. The enemies would be kept at bay. If the ritual failed, chaos would return. The world would slip toward 0. The Akitu also included a recitation of the Enuma Elish, the creation epic. But the recitation was not simply a remembering. It was a making reel. The words, spoken in the sacred precinct, brought the creation into being again. Marduk defeated Tiamat again. Order conquered chaos again. The world was remade as it had been made in the beginning, as it would need to be made again and again, forever. This is ritual as calendar, as countdown, as reset button. The same pattern appears in the Hindu festival of Mahashivaratri, the great night of Shiva. It occurs on the darkest night of the lunar month, just before the new moon. It is a night of fasting, of vigil, of meditation. Devotees stay awake through the night, chanting, praying, keeping watch. Why? Because Shiva is the destroyer, the god who dances the Tandava, the cosmic dance that ends the universe. And Mahashivaratri is the night when Shiva's destructive power is at its peak. The night when the world teeters on the edge of annihilation. By staying awake, by performing the rituals, devotees participate in the preservation of the world. They hold it together. They prevent the final dissolution. But the dissolution will come, must come, because Shiva's role is not evil. It is necessary. Destruction clears the way for creation. The old must die so the new can be born, and the cycle must turn. Mahashivaratri is a calendar, a ritual, a countdown, and a reset. In ancient Rome, the festival of Saturnalia marked the winter solstice. For several days, the social order was inverted. Slaves were freed. Masters served their servants. Slaves returned to their stations. The masters resumed their authority. The world, having touched the edge of dissolution, pulled back. The sun, having reached its lowest point, began to climb again. The year was reset. Time began anew. Saturnalia was not simply a party. It was a ritual reenactment of the cosmic cycle. The descent into chaos and the restoration of order. The death of the old year and the birth of the new. The countdown to 0 and the return to 1. Every culture has these rituals. The Jewish Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. The Islamic month of Ramadan. The Christian season of Lent. All of them involve fasting, sacrifice, atonement, purification. All of them mark a time of transition, of danger, of teetering on the edge. And all of them culminate in renewal, in forgiveness, in restoration. They are calendars made flesh, made action, made sacred. But there is a darker aspect to these rituals. One that we do not often speak of. The rituals that do not simply symbolize death, but enact it. The human sacrifices. The Aztecs are the most famous example. They sacrificed thousands of people, cutting out their hearts atop pyramids, offering the blood to the sun god, Tonatiuh, to ensure that the sun would continue to rise, because they believed that the sun was dying, that the fifth sun, the current age, was sustained only through constant sacrifice, that without blood, without death, the sun would fail, the world would end. This was not cruelty. This was desperation. This was a civilization living in terror of the countdown, living with the knowledge that the world had ended 4 times before, and trying, with every ritual, every sacrifice, every drop of blood, to hold off the 5th ending. The Inca, too, practiced human sacrifice, particularly of children. The Capacocha ceremony involved taking children to the tops of mountains, giving them coca leaves and alcohol, and leaving them to freeze to death. The children were not murdered. They were sent as messengers to the gods, as offerings, as prayers made flesh. And the gods, the Inca believed, would answer, would hold back the earthquakes, would ensure the harvests, would delay the Pachacuti, the turning of time. Even in the Old Testament we see echoes of this. The binding of Isaac. Abraham, commanded by God to sacrifice his son, raises the knife. And at the last moment an angel intervenes. A ram is provided. The child is spared. But the story exists. The memory exists. Of a time when the sacrifice was not spared. Of a time when the reset required blood. We recoil from this now. We call it barbarism. But perhaps we should ask, what were they so afraid of? What did they remember? What had they seen that made them willing to sacrifice their own children to prevent its return? If the cataclysm is real, if the countdown is real, if the world has ended before and will end again, then perhaps the rituals make sense. Not as morality, not as justice, but as desperation, as the only response available to a species that knows it is doomed and is trying, futilely, beautifully, tragically, to hold off the inevitable. Stay with me now. We're moving toward the heart of this, toward the question that underlies everything. If you've come this far, you're ready. And if it unsettles you, if it makes you question what you thought you knew, then good. That's the point. Let the discomfort sharpen your attention. So we come to the question that sleeps beneath all of this. The question that the calendars, the rituals, the monuments, the myths are all circling around but never quite answering. Why? Why count time backward from destruction? Why build a civilization around the memory of ending? Why invest so much energy, so much knowledge, so much sacred attention into tracking the cycles of catastrophe? One answer is survival. If you know when the disaster will come, you can prepare. You can store food, build shelters, migrate to safer ground. The calendar becomes a survival tool, a way to anticipate the flood, the drought, the ice, the fire. But there is another answer, one that is more unsettling, more profound. What if the purpose of the calendar is not to prevent the ending, but to participate in it? What if the ancients understood that the cycle is not a flaw in the cosmos, but its fundamental nature? That creation and destruction are not opposites, but phases of a single process? That the 0 point is not annihilation, but transformation? The Hindu concept of pralaya, the cosmic dissolution, is not eternal damnation. It is rest. It is the in-breath of Brahma. After Pralaya comes Shrishti, creation again. The same souls, the same worlds, playing out the same dramas, but renewed, refreshed. The wheel turns, and everything that was lost is found again. The Norse Ragnarok is apocalyptic, yes. The gods die. The world burns. But then the earth rises from the sea. Balder, the beautiful god, returns from the underworld. The cycle begins again. Even in Christian theology, the book of Revelation describes not only the end, but the new beginning. The new Jerusalem, the restoration of Eden, the wiping away of every tear. The ending is not the end. It is the return to the beginning. The countdown to zero is the countdown to rebirth. And if that is true, then the rituals, the sacrifices, the monuments, they are not attempts to stop the cycle. They are attempts to align with it, to move with it rather than against it, to surrender to the cosmic rhythm and trust that after the dissolution, there will be creation again. This is not nihilism. This is not despair. It is a kind of faith. A faith that the universe is not random, not cruel but patterned, cyclical, ultimately benevolent, even in its destruction. But there is a shadow side to this understanding. Because if the ending is inevitable, if the calendar is counting down and nothing can stop it, then what is the point of civilization? What is the point of knowledge, of art, of striving, of progress? If everything we build will be destroyed, if everything we know will be forgotten, if the world will return to zero and begin again, then why bother? The ancient answer is, because the striving is the point, because the building is the point, because the act of creating meaning in a cosmos that will inevitably destroy it is the most human thing we can do. The Egyptians built their pyramids knowing they would crumble. The Maya carved their calendars knowing the jungle would reclaim them. The Babylonians wrote their epics knowing the clay would crack and scatter. But they built them anyway, because the act of creation, even temporary creation, even doomed creation, is sacred. We are not building for eternity. We are building for the moment, for the now, for the brief, flickering span of time when we exist, when we are conscious, when we can look at the stars and ask why. And when the ending comes, when the countdown reaches zero, when the world resets, perhaps some fragment will survive. Some shard of pottery, some carved stone, some encoded memory, and the next civilization, rising from the ruins, will find it. And they will wonder, and they will remember dimly that we were here, that we knew, that we tried, and that is enough. But there is one more possibility, one more answer to the why, and it is the most unsettling of all. What if we are the calendar? What if human consciousness itself is the instrument that measures the cycles? What if we are not simply observers of the cosmic countdown, but participants in it? What if the purpose of humanity is to witness the ending and the beginning, to carry the memory across the zero point, to ensure that the knowledge is not lost? We are the only species, as far as we know, that is aware of time, that conceives of past and future, that builds calendars, writes histories, tells stories that span generations. We are the memory of the earth, the consciousness that looks back and looks forward. And if catastrophe comes, if the world resets, if the 0 point arrives, then we are the ones who will carry the knowledge forward. Or fail to. And if we fail, if we forget, if we lose the memory, then the next cycle will have to start from nothing. From the caves, from the stone tools, from the beginning. But if we remember, if we encode the knowledge, if we build our monuments and carve our warnings and pass down our stories, then the next cycle can begin from a higher point. The reset is not complete. The odometer rolls over, but the memory persists. This is why the calendar counts backward. Not to despair, but to remember, to ensure that when the ending comes, when the world is destroyed and remade, we do not lose ourselves completely. We do not fall all the way to zero. We catch ourselves partway down, and we climb again. This is the purpose. This is the why. We are the keepers of time, the witnesses of the cycles, the memory that survives the forgetting. And if you are listening to this now, if you have followed this thread through all the collapsed civilizations and forgotten calendars and buried warnings, then you are part of that memory. You are part of the keeping. You are part of the great work of ensuring that when the countdown reaches 0, something survives. Someone remembers. And that is not a small thing. That is not a futile thing. That is the most important thing a human being can do. To remember, to witness, to pass it on. That's the covenant. The unspoken promise that stretches across millennia. If this moves you, if you feel the pull of it, share this journey. Let others find it. Let the memory spread. Let the spiral turn. Let me take you now to the present, to our time, to the world we live in with our smartphones and satellites and nuclear arsenals. We believe we are so different from the ancients. We believe we have escaped the cycle, that we have conquered time, that we have built a civilization that will last forever. But have we? Look at the clocks we have built. Not the mechanical ones, not the sundials or water clocks or hourglasses. The other ones. The ones we do not talk about. The doomsday clock. Created in 1947 by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, it represents how close humanity is to self-annihilation. Midnight is the end. The apocalypse. And the clock has been counting down. In 1947, it was set to 7 minutes to midnight. In 2023, it was moved to 90 seconds to midnight. The closest it has ever been. We are counting backward. Again. The clock measures nuclear threats, climate change, pandemics, artificial intelligence. All the ways we have discovered to destroy ourselves. And it is ticking. The scientists move the hands based on evidence, on policy, on the state of the world. And every year it seems we move closer to 0. This is a modern calendar. A countdown. A warning. And like the calendars of the ancients, it raises the question. Is it meant to prevent the ending, or to prepare us for it? Consider the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Built into a mountain in the Arctic, deep in permafrost, it contains seeds from every major crop on Earth. Millions of samples. It is a backup, a reset button. If global agriculture collapses, if climate change devastates the food supply, if war or plague or disaster wipes out the crops, we can go to Svalbard. We can retrieve the seeds. We can start again. This is a monument, a modern Göbekli Tepe, a repository of knowledge built to survive catastrophe. Built with the understanding that catastrophe is possible, that the world as we know it might end, and that we need to preserve something, anything, to carry forward. We are doing what the ancients did. We are counting backward. We are preparing for 0. The Georgia Guidestones, erected in 1980 in rural Georgia, were another attempt at this. Massive granite slabs, inscribed in 8 languages, offering guidance for humanity after a catastrophe. Maintain population under 500 million. Guide reproduction wisely. Unite humanity with a living new language. The messages are cryptic, controversial, unsettling. The Guidestones were blown up in 2022. Destroyed. The memory erased. Whether by vandals, conspiracists, or something else, we do not know. But the attempt was made. To build a monument. To encode a message. To warn the future. We are remembering how to count backward. And then there is the Long Now Foundation. An organization dedicated to thinking in spans of 10,000 years. They are building a clock, the clock of the long now, designed to run for 10 millennia. Ticks once a year. The century hand advances once every 100 years. The cuckoo comes out once a millennium. Why build such a thing? Because we have become short-sighted. Because we think in terms of quarterly profits and election cycles and trending topics. Because we have lost the ability to conceive of deep time. To think in terms of centuries and millennia. To remember that we are part of a story that stretches far beyond our individual lives. The clock of the long now is a calendar, a reminder, a tool to reorient ourselves to the cosmic scale, to remember that the countdown is long, but it is real, and that we are responsible not only for ourselves, but for the generations that will come after, for the 10,000 years after us. We are building the pyramids again, the stone circles, the carved warnings. We are trying, in our modern way, to do what the ancients did, to encode the knowledge, to mark the time, to prepare for the ending and the beginning. But will it work? The ancient monuments survived because they were stone, because they were massive, because they were simple enough that even if the culture that built them collapsed, the structure remained. Future generations could look at them and wonder, and eventually decode them. But what are we building? Data centers full of servers that will corrode in decades. Satellites that will fall from orbit. Digital archives that require electricity, maintenance, infrastructure. If the grid fails, if the knowledge chain breaks, if we lose the ability to read our own file formats, then everything we have stored will be lost. Not in millennia, in years. We are more fragile than the ancients. Our knowledge is more sophisticated but more ephemeral. We have built a civilization on sand. And the countdown continues. Climate scientists tell us we have passed tipping points. That feedback loops are accelerating. That the ice is melting faster than predicted. That the oceans are warming, acidifying. That coral reefs are dying. That insect populations are collapsing. That the web of life that sustains us is unraveling. We are counting down to an ending we can see coming. And we are not stopping it. We are not even slowing it. We are arguing about it, politicizing it, denying it while the countdown continues. This is not the first time. This is not unique. This is the pattern. The Maya saw their environment degrading. They saw the droughts intensifying. And they built more temples. They sacrificed more lives. They prayed harder. And the civilization collapsed anyway. Easter Island saw the forests disappearing. They saw the soil eroding. And they carved more moai, bigger ones, more elaborate ones, as though the ritual alone could reverse the damage. And the civilization collapsed anyway. We are doing the same. We are launching more satellites, building more data centers, creating more technology, as though innovation alone will save us, as though we can engineer our way out of a cycle that is older and deeper than our cleverness. Maybe we can. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe we will be the civilization that breaks the cycle, that reaches escape velocity, that becomes sustainable, interplanetary, immortal. Or maybe we are just the latest iteration of a pattern that has repeated over and over. A civilization that rises, that reaches toward the stars, that counts the cycles, that sees the ending coming, and that collapses back to zero. And if we collapse, what will survive? What will the archaeologists of the next cycle find? Will they find the seed vault? The clock of the long now? The ruins of our cities, our monuments, our satellites falling like stars? Will they wonder about us as we wonder about the Maya and the Egyptians and the builders of Göbekli Tepe? Will they ask, why did they count backward? Why did they build calendars around their own destruction? Why did they see it coming and not stop it? And will they learn? Or will they repeat the pattern? This is where we are. This is the moment. The clock is ticking. The countdown is real. And we are standing at the threshold, looking back at all the civilizations that came before, all the calendars carved in stone, all the warnings left for us, and we are asking, what do we do? What do we do? This is the question. The only question that matters. If the cycle is real, if the countdown is real, if we are living in the final years or decades or centuries before the next reset, then what do we do? Do we despair? Do we surrender to the inevitability and let the world burn? Or do we build? Do we create? Do we encode our knowledge into something that will survive? Do we become the ancients for the future, leaving behind our own Göbekli Tepe, our own pyramids, our own warnings carved in stone? Or is there a third option, one that the ancients did not have or did not take? Can we break the cycle? Can we become the civilization that does not collapse? That does not count down to zero, but counts upward, indefinitely, into a future that is not apocalyptic but utopian? I do not know. No one knows. We are living the question. We are the experiment. And the outcome is not yet written. But I can tell you this. The calendars that count backward are not only warnings. They are also maps. They show us where we have been. They show us the patterns. They show us that the cycle is not random, not chaotic, but structured. And if it is structured, then perhaps it can be understood. And if it can be understood, then perhaps it can be navigated. The ancients believed that by aligning with the cycles, by performing the rituals at the right times, by honoring the gods and the cosmos, they could survive the turning. They could ride the wave of destruction and emerge on the other side. We do not believe in their gods. We do not perform their rituals. But we can learn from their insight. We can recognize that we are not separate from the cosmos. We are not above the cycles. We are part of them, and our survival depends not on conquering nature, but on aligning with it. This means living sustainably. It means recognizing limits. It means understanding that infinite growth on a finite planet is a countdown to collapse. It means relearning the old knowledge, how to live with the land, not on it. How to take only what is needed. How to give back. The indigenous peoples of the world have never forgotten this. They have been counting time differently all along. Not forward toward progress, not backward from catastrophe, but cyclically, seasonally, in harmony with the rhythms of the earth. They are the unbroken thread, the continuous memory, and we, the inheritors of collapsed civilizations, the amnesiacs stumbling through the ruins, would do well to listen. But there is also a deeper answer. A spiritual answer, if you will allow me to use that word. The calendar that counts backward teaches us that endings are not failures. They are transformations. That death is not the opposite of life, but part of it. That every ending contains within it the seed of a new beginning. We fear death. We fear collapse. We fear the 0 point. But what if the 0 point is not oblivion? What if it is liberation? What if it is the moment when all the accumulated weight of history, all the mistakes and traumas and baggage, is released? When the slate is wiped clean and we can begin again, fresh, unburdened? The mystics have always known this. The Buddhist concept of sunyata, emptiness, is not nihilistic. It is the recognition that all things are impermanent, that all forms are transient, and that liberation comes from releasing our attachment to permanence. The 0 point is not annihilation. It is enlightenment. The Christian mystics speak of kenosis, self-emptying. The soul must be emptied of ego, of pride, of attachment, to be filled with the divine. The countdown to 0 is the countdown to union with God. The Sufi poets sing of fana, annihilation of the self in the presence of the beloved. Rumi writes, "Die before you die." The ending is not to be feared. It is to be embraced. It is the doorway to something greater. Perhaps the ancients understood this. Perhaps their calendars, their rituals, their willingness to count backward from destruction, were not expressions of fear, but of wisdom. They knew that the world would end, and they accepted it. They made peace with it. They aligned their entire civilization around it, not as tragedy, but as sacred truth. And perhaps we, too, can come to that understanding. Not as resignation, but as acceptance. Not as despair, but as freedom. We do not have to cling. We do not have to grasp. We do not have to build empires that we pretend will last forever. We can create beauty knowing it is temporary. We can love knowing we will lose. We can live knowing we will die. And in that knowing, in that acceptance, we can find a kind of peace that transcends the cycle. This is not easy. This is not natural, at least not for the modern mind. We are trained to accumulate, to achieve, to progress, to count forward, always forward, to deny death, to postpone it, to rage against it. But the calendar that counts backward asks us to do the opposite, to face the ending, to accept it, to prepare for it, yes, but also to honor it, to see it not as failure, but as completion, as the natural rhythm of existence. And if we can do that, if we can make peace with the countdown, then perhaps we can live differently, more fully, more presently, more gratefully, because every moment becomes precious when you know it is limited. Every breath becomes sacred when you understand that the clock is ticking. The ancient calendars were not only about survival. They were about meaning. They were about embedding human life within a cosmic context, about understanding that we are not separate from the universe but part of its grand unfolding. We are the universe becoming conscious of itself, watching itself, counting its own cycles, preparing for its own transformation. And if the ending comes, if the world resets, if we return to 0, then we will have lived as fully as we could. We will have created what we could. We will have loved, and suffered, and wondered, and tried. And that is enough. That is all there is. That is everything. Let yourself rest in that. Let the weight of it settle. You've traveled far through this labyrinth of time and memory. And if you've found something true here, something that resonates in the marrow of your being, then you're part of the great remembering. And you're not walking it alone. There is one final place I want to take you. Not a ruin, not a temple, not a monument carved by ancient hands, but a place inside you, inside all of us, the place where the calendar lives. Memory. We are, each of us, a calendar. We count time not only in years and days, but in moments, in milestones, in the events that shape us. We divide our lives into before and after. Before the accident, after the loss, before the love, after the betrayal. We count backward from our own personal catastrophes and forward from our own resurrections. We are living the cycle in miniature. Think about your own life. Think about the moments when the world ended, when a relationship collapsed, when a dream died, when a loved one passed, when the future you imagined evaporated and you were left standing in the ruins, counting backward from the moment everything changed. And think about what you did next. You rebuilt. You created a new life from the pieces of the old. You reset. You began again. This is not metaphor. This is the human condition. We are the species that endures endings, that survives catastrophe, that counts down to zero and then, somehow miraculously starts counting upward again. And this capacity, this resilience is not new. It is ancient. It is the same capacity that allowed our ancestors to survive the Younger Dryas, to rebuild after the flood, to carve warnings into stone and pass them down through generations. It is encoded in our DNA, in our mythology, in our collective memory. We are the descendants of survivors, every single one of us. Our lineages stretch back through ice ages and plagues and wars and famines and collapses. We carry within us the memory of 1,000 endings and 1,000 beginnings. This is why the stories resonate. This is why the calendars matter. Because they are not only about ancient civilizations or cosmic cycles. They are about us, about you, about the journey you are on, the countdown you are living, the 0 points you have crossed and will cross again. The ancients understood this. They built their calendars not only to track the stars, but to track the soul. The journey of death and rebirth. The descent into darkness and the return to light. The ending and the beginning. The Eleusinian mysteries, the secret religious rites of ancient Greece, centered on this journey. Initiates would descend into an underground chamber, into symbolic death, into the underworld. And there they would witness something, no one knows exactly what, because the initiates were sworn to secrecy, but whatever it was, it transformed them. They emerged from the chamber reborn, fearless, at peace with death because they had already experienced it and returned. The calendar was not external. It was internal. The countdown was not to some future apocalypse. It was to the present moment, the eternal now, the 0 point where death and life meet. This is what the mystics have always taught, that enlightenment is not an achievement. It is a surrender, a release, a return to zero. The ego, the constructed self, the accumulation of identity and story and attachment, it must all be let go. The calendar must count down to nothing. And in that nothing, in that emptiness, the divine is found. Jesus in the tomb, Osiris dismembered and scattered, Inanna descending to the underworld, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, assaulted by Mara's demons, Persephone in Hades, Jonah in the belly of the whale. Every spiritual tradition has this story. The hero must die, must descend, must pass through the 0 point, and only then, only after the ending, can the resurrection come. We are living this story, every day, every moment. The countdown is not someday. It is now. The 0 point is not a distant future. It is here, in the present, in the space between breaths, in the silence between thoughts. And if we can become aware of it, if we can live consciously in the countdown, then we are no longer victims of the cycle. We are participants. We are co-creators. We are the ones who hold the memory and pass it forward. This is the secret, the hidden knowledge encoded in the calendars. Not a prediction of external catastrophe, but an invitation to internal transformation. The world will end. Yes, it always does. Every night when you sleep, the world ends. Every time you let go of something you were clinging to, the world ends. Every time you forgive or grieve or release or surrender, the world ends. And every morning when you wake, it begins again. Every time you choose to love after loss, to hope after despair, to build after destruction, the world begins again. You are the calendar. You are the cycle. You are the countdown and the reset. And the ancients, with their monuments and rituals and myths, were not trying to escape this truth. They were trying to teach it, to remind us, to encode it so deeply into stone and story that we could never forget, even if we wanted to. But we did forget. We built a civilization that denies death, that chases immortality, that counts only forward and never backward. And in doing so, we lost the wisdom. We lost the peace. We lost the understanding that the ending is not the enemy. It is the teacher. So here we are, at the end of this journey, at the end of this script, counting down to the final word. And what have we learned? That time is not linear, that civilizations rise and fall, that the ancients knew something we have forgotten, that the calendar that counts backward is a map, a warning, an invitation, that we are part of the cycle, not separate from it, that the 0 point is not oblivion, but transformation, that every ending is a beginning, and that you, listening now, in whatever hour of the night or day, in whatever corner of the world, are carrying the memory forward. You are the link in the chain. You are the keeper of time. You are the one who remembers. And if you remember, then the knowledge is not lost. The cycle is not broken. The calendar continues. And when the next ending comes, whether in your personal life or in the life of the world, you will know. You will understand. You will count backward without fear. And you will wait patiently for the reset, for the return to 0, for the beginning again. This is the gift of the ancient calendars. Not a prediction, not a warning, but a promise that no matter how dark it gets, no matter how far we fall, no matter how completely the world seems to end, there is always a dawn. There is always a spring. There is always a return. The wheel turns. The calendar resets. And we begin again. Thank you for walking this path with me, for listening through the long night, for holding the questions and the mystery and the weight of deep time. If this journey has meant something to you, if it has opened something, changed something, let others know. Share it. Let the memory widen. Let the spiral carry this forward. And tell me, one last time, where are you now? What time is it in your world? Are you drifting towards sleep or waking into a new day? Either way, you are standing at the 0 point, the ending and the beginning, the breath between breaths. Welcome to the reset. But wait, there is one more thing. One thread we have not yet pulled. One question that remains. If all of this is true, if the calendars are real, if the cycle is real, if the ancients witnessed catastrophe and encoded the memory into stone and myth, then why? Why does the cycle exist at all? Why does the universe operate this way? Why must everything end only to begin again? The scientific answer is entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. All systems move from order to disorder. Stars burn out. Mountains erode. Civilizations collapse. The universe itself, according to current cosmology, will eventually experience heat death. All energy will dissipate. All stars will fade. All matter will decay. And there will be nothing. Absolute 0. But even this ending is not permanent, some physicists speculate. Perhaps quantum fluctuations will eventually spark a new Big Bang. Perhaps the universe is cyclical. Perhaps it expands and contracts eternally. Big Bang, expansion, heat death, big crunch. And then bang again. The cosmic calendar counting down to 0 and resetting, over and over, forever. We do not know. We cannot know. The universe keeps its deepest secrets. But the ancients offered a different answer. Not scientific, but mythological, theological, philosophical. They said, the cycle exists because consciousness requires it. You cannot know light without darkness. You cannot know creation without destruction. You cannot know life without death. The opposites define each other. They require each other. Without the ending, the beginning has no meaning. Without the countdown, time has no structure. Without the 0 point, there is no transformation. The cycle is not a flaw. It is the mechanism of meaning. Think about a story. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. If there were no ending, there would be no story. It would just be an endless sequence of events, without shape, without climax, without resolution. The ending is what gives the story meaning, what allows it to be told, to be remembered, to be passed down. The universe is telling a story, and we are part of it. We are characters in the grand narrative of existence. And the cycle, the calendar, the countdown, these are the narrative structure. The rising action, the climax, the denouement, and then the reset for the next chapter. The ancients understood this. Their myths are not primitive superstition. They are sophisticated attempts to articulate the deep structure of reality. They knew that the world is not a machine, indifferent and cold. It is a story, a drama, a play performed by the gods, with us as both audience and actors. And the calendar that counts backward is the script. Tells us where we are in the story. Tells us that the climax is approaching, that the ending is near, that we are living in the third act, that the tension is building, that the resolution is coming. But it does not tell us what the resolution will be. That is still being written. We are still writing it. Every choice we make, every action we take, every moment of consciousness. It all contributes to the story. We are not passive. We are not fated. We are co-authors. This is the great paradox. The calendar is fixed. The cycle is inevitable. The countdown is real. And yet, within that structure, we are free. We can choose how to respond. We can choose what to build. We can choose what to remember. We can choose how to love, how to grieve, how to die, how to be reborn. The ancients lived this paradox. They accepted the cycle, and yet they acted. They built pyramids that would last millennia, knowing the sands would eventually swallow them. They carved calendars into stone, knowing the stone would erode. They passed down stories, knowing the languages would die. They acted as though their creations were eternal, while knowing they were temporary. This is the wisdom, to live fully in the face of impermanence, to create beauty knowing it will fade, to love knowing you will lose, to strive knowing you will fail, to build knowing it will crumble, because the act itself is sacred. The creation itself is the meaning, not the preservation, not the permanence, but the doing, the being, the presence. We in the modern world have lost this. We want everything to last forever. We want to upload our minds to computers to achieve digital immortality. We want to freeze our bodies to cure aging, to defeat death. We want to escape the cycle. But what if the cycle is not a prison? What if it is a gift? What if impermanence is what makes life precious? What if the countdown is what gives each moment weight, significance, urgency? If you had infinite time, would anything matter? If you knew you could never lose anything, would you ever truly appreciate it? If there were no endings, would there be any beginnings? The calendar that counts backward is a reminder, a memento mori. Remember you will die. Remember the world will end. Remember that time is finite. And because it is finite, because it is counting down, because the 0 point is approaching, pay attention. Be present. Love deeply. Create boldly. Live fully. This is not morbid. This is not pessimistic. This is life-affirming. This is the deepest wisdom the ancients had to offer. And it is the wisdom we need now, urgently, as we stand at our own threshold. As our own calendars count down. As our own civilization teeters on the edge. We can despair, or we can live. We can rage against the ending, or we can accept it, honor it, and pour ourselves fully into the time we have left. Because whether the ending is personal or global, whether it comes tomorrow or in 1,000 years, it is coming. The countdown is real. The 0 point approaches. And when it arrives, when the world ends and begins again, the only question that will matter is, did we live? Did we love? Did we create? Did we remember? Did we become, in our own small way, the ancients for the future? This is the question the calendar asks. This is the challenge it offers. This is the invitation carved into stone, whispered through myth, encoded in the cycles of the stars. Will you answer it? Will you count backward without fear? Will you embrace the 0 point? Will you live fully in the countdown? The calendar is ticking. The cycle is turning. The story is unfolding. And you are here, now, in this moment, at this precise point in the spiral, reading these words, breathing this breath, living this life. What will you do with it? What will you build? What will you remember? What will you pass down? The ancients are watching, not from the past but from within. Their memory lives in you. Their knowledge sleeps in your bones. Their calendars are carved into your DNA. You are the continuation. You are the answer. You are the next chapter in the story that began when the first human looked up at the stars and wondered when. The calendar that counts backward is not a prediction. It is a question. And the question is, who will you be in the time that remains? Imagine you are standing at the foot of a pyramid. Not in Egypt, not in Mexico, but in your own mind. A structure you have been building your entire life. Layer upon layer of experience, memory, belief, identity. Towers above you, massive, complex, intricate. And you realize suddenly that it is not solid. It is not permanent. It is built on sand. And the sand is shifting. The countdown has reached its final moments. And the pyramid is beginning to crack. You can feel it. The tremor. The instability. The sense that everything you thought was solid is actually fluid. That everything you thought was permanent is actually temporary. That the self you have constructed, the world you have inhabited, the reality you have taken for granted, it is all dissolving. This is the 0 point, not out there in some distant apocalypse, but here, now, inside you, and you have a choice. You can cling. You can try to hold the pyramid together. You can shore up the cracks, reinforce the walls, deny the tremor. You can spend all your energy trying to maintain the structure, trying to prevent the collapse, trying to stop the countdown. Or you can let go. You can step back. You can watch the pyramid crumble. You can allow the 0 point to arrive. You can surrender to the ending. And you can trust that when the dust settles, when the rubble clears, when the countdown completes, there will be something else. Not nothing. Not oblivion. But something new. Something you cannot yet imagine. Something that can only emerge after the old has been released. This is the spiritual practice encoded in the ancient calendars. The practice of letting go, of surrendering, of dying before you die so that you can be reborn before you are reborn. The mystics call it many names. Ego death, dark night of the soul, the void, the abyss, the 0 point, and every mystic who has walked this path reports the same thing. It is terrifying. Feels like annihilation, feels like the end of everything. But on the other side, there is freedom. There is peace. There is a sense of being more fully alive than ever before. Because what dies is not you. What dies is the constructed you, the story, the identity, the accumulated weight of who you thought you were. And when that falls away, what remains is the awareness itself, the consciousness, the presence. The eternal witness that has been there all along, watching the pyramid being built, watching it stand, watching it crumble. You are not the pyramid. You are the space in which the pyramid appears. And that space cannot be destroyed. It is infinite. It is eternal. It is the ground of being itself. The calendar that counts backward is pointing to this truth. It is saying you are not your history. You are not your achievements. You are not your identity. All of that is temporary. All of that is part of the cycle. All of that will end. But you, the you that is aware of all of this, the you that is reading these words, the you that has been present for every moment of your life, you are not temporary. You are the constant, the 0 point from which everything arises and to which everything returns. And when you realize this, when you truly understand it, then the countdown is no longer frightening. It is liberating. Because you realize that there is nothing to lose. The self you thought you were is already gone. It was always an illusion, a story, pyramid built on sand. And in the collapse, in the ending, in the 0 point, you discover what was always there. The ground, the foundation, the eternal presence. This is what the ancients were teaching. This is what the rituals were enacting. This is what the calendars were encoding. Not information, not prediction, but transformation. The countdown is not to an external event. It is to an internal realization. The apocalypse is not the end of the world. It is the end of the illusion, the unveiling, the revelation, and it is happening now, not in some distant future. Now, in this moment, in every moment, every time you let go of a belief that no longer serves you, the calendar counts down. Every time you release a relationship that has ended, the calendar counts down. Every time you forgive, surrender, accept, grieve, let go, the calendar counts down. You are always counting backward, always approaching 0, always on the threshold of transformation. And the question is, will you resist it? Will you cling to the pyramid? Will you spend your life trying to prevent the inevitable? Or will you embrace it? Will you lean into the countdown? Will you allow the 0 point to arrive? This is not passivity. This is not resignation. This is the most active, courageous, radical thing you can do. To consciously participate in your own dissolution. To willingly step into the fire. To count down to 0 and welcome it. Because on the other side is not death. On the other side is life. Real life. Unfiltered. Unmediated. Undefended. The life that the ancients knew. The life that the mystics speak of. The life that is always here, always now, always available. If only we can let go of the story long enough to notice it. This is the final secret, the ultimate teaching, the deepest knowledge encoded in the calendars that count backward. The ending is not the end. 0 is not nothing. The apocalypse is not annihilation. It is revelation. It is transformation. It is the return to the source, to the ground, to the beginning before the beginning. And you have always been there. You have never left. You are, right now, in this moment, the 0 point. The still center around which the entire universe revolves, the awareness in which all stories arise and dissolve, the eternal witness of the cycle. The calendar has been counting down to this realization, not to some future moment, to this one, to now. You are the ending. You are the beginning. You are the cycle. You are the calendar. You are the memory. You are the countdown. You are the 0 point, and you are here, awake. Aware, present, welcome home. And now, as we approach the true end of this journey, let me bring you back. Back from the cosmos. Back from the pyramids and the ruins and the stone circles. Back from the myths and the rituals and the mystics. Back from the 0 point inside you. Back to the world. This world. The one you live in. The one that is counting down. Because the knowledge, the wisdom, the revelation, it means nothing if it does not translate into action. If it does not change how you live. If it does not inform your choices, your relationships, your engagement with the world. The ancients did not build their calendars as intellectual exercises. They built them as survival tools, as guides for how to live. And we, their descendants, standing at our own threshold, need those tools now more than ever. So what does it mean to live consciously in the countdown? It means waking up. Paying attention, noticing the patterns, recognizing the cycles, understanding that the crises we face, climate, ecological, social, political, spiritual, are not random. They are part of a larger pattern, a pattern that has repeated throughout history, and we can either deny it, ignore it, distract ourselves from it, or we can face it, name it, and ask, what is trying to be born? Because every ending is a beginning. Every collapse is an opportunity. Every crisis is a doorway. The old structures are crumbling. The old systems are failing. The old stories are no longer working. And that is terrifying. But it is also liberating. Because it means we have the chance to build something new. To create does not deny the cycles but works with them. One that does not count forward in blind optimism or backward in paralyzing fear, but that honors the rhythm of creation and destruction, growth and decay, life and death. What would such a civilization look like? It would be regenerative rather than extractive. It would take only what it needs and give back more than it takes. It would understand that the earth is not a resource to be exploited but a living system to be honored. It would be cyclical rather than linear. It would recognize that waste is food, that endings are beginnings, that death nourishes life. It would design systems that close the loop, that return nutrients to the soil, that restore rather than deplete. It would be local rather than global. It would build communities that are resilient, that can survive disruptions, that are rooted in place and connected to the land. It would trade globalization for localization, efficiency for resilience, growth for sustainability. It would be sacred rather than secular. It would recognize that the earth is not dead matter but alive, ensouled, conscious. It would honor the cycles of the seasons, the phases of the moon, the movements of the stars. It would embed ritual and ceremony into daily life, not as superstition but as technology for aligning human consciousness with cosmic rhythms. It would be wise rather than clever. It would value the knowledge of elders, of indigenous peoples, of traditions that have survived for millennia. It would understand that progress is not always forward, that sometimes the way forward is to remember what has been forgotten, to reclaim what has been lost. This is not utopian fantasy. This is practical necessity, because the countdown is real. The systems are failing. The old world is ending, and we can either cling to the wreckage, hoping it will somehow hold together a little longer, or we can let go. We can grieve what is being lost, and we can begin consciously, courageously to build the new. This is the work. This is the calling. This is what the ancient calendars are asking of us. Not to despair, not to escape, but to participate, to become the ancestors of the future, to encode the knowledge, to pass it down, to ensure that when the reset comes, when the cycle turns, when the world begins again, the wisdom survives. And the wisdom is simple. It is ancient. It is carved into stone and whispered through myths and encoded in your very DNA. You are not separate from the earth. You are the earth. You are the water and the air and the fire and the soil. You are the cycles. You are the seasons. You are the turning of the wheel. And when you live in alignment with this truth, when you honor the rhythms, when you give thanks, when you take only what you need, when you recognize the sacred in all things, you become part of the solution. You become a thread in the web of life that is reweaving itself, regenerating itself, healing itself. This is not about saving the world. The world will be fine. The Earth has survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and mass extinctions. It will survive us too. This is about saving ourselves, about ensuring that humanity has a place in the world that is coming, that we do not go the way of the dinosaurs, the mammoths, the countless species that failed to adapt and were erased by the turning of the cycle. We are not guaranteed survival. We are not entitled to a future, but we have a chance. We have a choice. And the choice is now. Will we continue counting forward, pretending the growth can continue forever, denying the limits, ignoring the warnings? Or will we begin counting backward, not in fear, but in wisdom, acknowledging the ending, honoring the cycle, preparing for the transformation? The ancient calendars offer no guarantees. They do not promise that we will survive. They only promise that the cycle will turn, that the world will end, and that something will begin again. Whether we are part of that beginning is up to us. So here we are, at the end of this long meditation on time and memory and catastrophe and hope. And the question before you is the same question that has always been before humanity, in every age, in every civilization, at every turning of the wheel. What will you do? Will you build a pyramid? Carve a warning? Plant a seed? Tell a story? Teach a child? Honor the earth? Live with intention? Love with abandon? Create with courage? Will you become the memory that survives? The calendar is counting down. The cycle is turning. The world is ending and beginning, as it always has, as it always will. And you are here, now, in the midst of it all, conscious witness, participant, co-creator. The ancients are not gone. They are here in you. Their knowledge is your inheritance. Their struggle is your struggle. Their hope is your hope. You are the continuation of a story that stretches back to the first fire, the first tool, the first painted image on a cave wall. A story of a species that looked up at the stars and wondered, that counted time, that remembered the past and imagined the future, that survived ice and flood and drought and war, that fell and rose again. You are the latest chapter, and the chapter is not yet finished. The story is still being written. What will your contribution be? What will you add to the great library of human memory? What will you pass down to those who come after? The countdown continues. The 0 point approaches. The ending and the beginning draw near. And you, reader, listener, seeker, wanderer, you are standing at the threshold. Welcome to the turning. Welcome to the reset. Welcome to the time that counts backward and forward simultaneously, to the moment that is always ending and always beginning, to the eternal now where past and future collapse into presence. This is your time, your moment, your chance. The calendar is yours. The story is yours. The choice is yours. Count wisely. Before we part, before this voice fades and you drift back into your own thoughts, your own silence, let me leave you with one final image. One final story. One final piece of the pattern. There is a flower called the Selenicerius grandiflorus, the queen of the night. It blooms only once a year, only for a single night. The bud opens slowly at dusk, revealing petals of impossible white, luminous in the darkness. A fragrance fills the air, intoxicating, transient. And by dawn, the flower is gone, wilted, dead. The bloom that took an entire year to prepare lasts only hours. And yet, the plant blooms. Every year, without fail. It invests everything, all its energy, all its resources, all its life force, into this one brief moment of flowering. And then it releases it, lets it go, allows it to die, knowing that next year, if it survives, it will bloom again. The queen of the night does not mourn its brevity. It does not rage against the dawn. It blooms fully, completely, joyfully, for the hours it has, and then it rests, and waits, and prepares for the next cycle. This is the wisdom of the calendar that counts backward. This is the teaching encoded in the ancient stones. This is the secret whispered through the millennia. Bloom where you are, for as long as you have, without holding back, without reservation, without the illusion that you can make it last forever. Because you cannot. None of us can. The countdown is inexorable. The cycle is unstoppable. The ending will come. But between now and then, there is this breath, this moment, this chance to bloom. And if you bloom fully, if you give yourself completely to the time you have, then when the ending comes, you will have no regrets. You will have held nothing back. You will have lived. The ancients knew this. Every monument they built, every calendar they carved, every ritual they performed was an act of blooming. They knew their civilizations would fall. They knew their names would be forgotten. They knew the jungle would reclaim their cities. The sand would bury their temples. The wind would erode their stones. And they built them anyway, not to last forever, but to bloom, to express, to create, to say, while they could, we were here. We saw the stars. We counted the cycles. We loved, we wondered, we tried, and that was enough. Can you live like that? Can you create knowing your creation will crumble? Can you love knowing you will lose? Can you bloom knowing the dawn will come? This is the question the calendar asks, not rhetorically, not philosophically, but practically, daily, in every choice, every action, every moment. Will you bloom, or will you hold back? Will you wait for the perfect conditions, the guaranteed outcome, the promise of permanence? Will you postpone your life until the countdown stops? It will not stop. The countdown is the condition of existence. Time is always counting down. You are always approaching zero. From the moment you were born, you have been dying. This is not morbid. This is not pessimistic. This is the truth that makes every moment sacred. The queen of the night does not have the luxury of waiting. Neither do you. So bloom, now, today, in whatever small or large way is available to you. Speak the words you have been holding. Create the art you have been postponing. Express the love you have been guarding. Take the risk you have been avoiding. Not because you are guaranteed success. Not because it will last forever. But because this is your moment. This is your night. This is your chance to bloom. And when the dawn comes, when your flower wilts, when your moment passes, you will know that you held nothing back. That you gave everything. That you bloomed. And the plant will rest. And perhaps, if the conditions are right, if the cycle turns favorably, it will bloom again. But even if it does not, even if this was the final bloom, it was enough. It was complete. It was whole. This is how the ancients lived. In the shadow of the countdown. In the awareness of the ending. And yet, fully, joyfully, completely, they did not let the knowledge of impermanence paralyze them. They let it liberate them. They let it infuse every moment with urgency and preciousness and sacred attention. And we can do the same. We must do the same. Because we are living at a hinge point in history. Turning. A 0 point. The old world is ending. The new world has not yet been born. And we are the ones standing in the gap, in the liminal space, in the darkness between the death and the birth. We are the queen of the night, blooming in the darkest hour. And the question is, will we bloom fully? Or will we close our petals, waiting for a dawn that may never come? The calendar that counts backward is not telling us to give up. It is telling us to wake up, to pay attention, to recognize that this moment, right now, this breath, this heartbeat is all we have, and all we need. Because if we are fully present to this moment, fully alive to this breath, then we are not counting anymore. We are not waiting for the ending or fearing the 0 point. We are simply here, now, awake, aware, blooming. And in that presence, in that fullness, in that blooming, we touch eternity. We become timeless. We step outside the cycle while remaining fully within it. This is the paradox. This is the mystery. This is the secret the ancients encoded into their calendars, knowing that one day, at the right moment, at the right turning of the wheel, someone would be ready to understand. And you are that someone. You are the one who has listened through the long night, who has followed the thread through the labyrinth, who has counted backward to this moment. And here you are, 0, at the beginning and the ending, at the still point where all things converge. The calendar has brought you here, to this breath, this awareness, this presence. And now the calendar releases you. It has served its purpose. It has counted down to 0. And at 0 there is no more counting. There is only being. So be, bloom, live, love, create, remember, witness, wonder, for as long as you have, in whatever way calls to you, without reservation, without holding back, because this is your time, your moment, your night to bloom. And when the dawn comes, as it must, you will have no regrets. You will have lived fully. You will have bloomed completely, and the cycle will turn. The calendar will reset, and something new will begin. But for now, for this moment, there is only this. You, here, now, awake. Welcome to 0. Welcome to the beginning. Welcome to the endless, eternal, ever-present now. Bloom, dear soul. Bloom while you can. The night is yours. I want to tell you something that might unsettle you. Something that has been implied throughout this entire journey but never stated directly. The countdown is not ahead of us. It is behind us. We have already passed the 0 point. We are already living in the aftermath. We are already in the reset. Think about it. The Younger Dryas 12,000 years ago. The great catastrophe. The flood. The fire. The ice. The collapse of the world that came before. That was the 0 point. That was the ending. And everything since, all of recorded history, all of civilization as we know it, is the aftermath. The rebuilding. The slow, painful climb back from the abyss. Göbekli Tepe was not built by primitives emerging from the Stone Age. It was built by survivors, by the remnants of a lost world, by people who remembered something greater and were trying, desperately, to preserve it, to encode it, to pass it down. The pyramids, the ziggurats, the stone circles, these were not innovations. They were restorations. They were attempts to remember, to rebuild, to reclaim what had been lost. The calendars that count backward are not predicting a future catastrophe. They are commemorating a past one. They are measuring the distance from the last 0 point, and perhaps warning of the next. This changes everything. It means that civilization, as we know it, is not the pinnacle of human achievement. It is the recovery, the shadow of something greater, the echo of a forgotten golden age. And the knowledge we are so proud of, our science, our technology, our mathematics, may not be discoveries. They may be rediscoveries, memories surfacing from the collective unconscious, knowledge encoded in our DNA, in our myths, in the stones left by those who came before. This is not fantasy. This is not pseudoscience. This is pattern recognition. This is looking at the evidence, the anomalies, the out-of-place artifacts, the impossible precision of ancient monuments, and asking, what if the conventional timeline is wrong? What if human history is far older, far deeper, far more mysterious than we have been taught? What if we are not the first advanced civilization? What if we are the latest in a long series? What if the cycle has turned many times? What if the calendar has been reset again and again, and we are living in one iteration of many? The ancients seemed to know this. They spoke of previous ages, previous worlds, previous humanities, the Hindu yugas, the Hesiodic ages, the Aztec suns, the biblical antediluvian patriarchs. They all point to the same truth. There were others before us, and they were lost, and we are what came after, and we have forgotten, almost completely. We have lost the memory of who we were, what we knew, what we were capable of. The amnesia is nearly total. We look at the pyramids and say, we could not build that today. We look at the Antikythera mechanism and say, that should not exist. We look at the astronomical precision of ancient cultures and say, how did they know? But the question is not how did they know. The question is how did we forget? And the answer is catastrophe, collapse, the 0 point, the ending that erases almost everything, that breaks the continuity, that forces the survivors to start over, almost from scratch. And we are those survivors. We are the descendants of the ones who made it through, who crawled out of the caves, who rebuilt the fires, who replanted the fields, who looked up at the stars and tried to remember, to piece together the fragments, to restore what was lost. And slowly, over millennia, we have been remembering, rediscovering, reinventing. We think we are innovating, but we are remembering. We think we are progressing, but we are restoring. And now here we are, at a level of technological sophistication that is beginning to approach, perhaps, what was lost. We can build monuments. We can calculate the stars. We can manipulate genes and atoms. We are approaching the 0 point again. But this time from the other side. Not descending into collapse, but ascending toward, what? Another peak? Another golden age? Another height from which we will inevitably fall? Or can we break the cycle? Can we learn from the past, from the warnings, from the calendars that count backward? Can we avoid the mistakes that led to the last collapse? Can we become the first civilization that does not end, that does not reset, that continues indefinitely upward toward something genuinely new? I do not know. No one knows. We are in the midst of the experiment. We are living the question. But I can tell you this. If we are to have any chance of breaking the cycle, we must remember. We must reclaim the knowledge that was lost. Not just the technical knowledge, how to build, how to calculate, how to manipulate, but the wisdom, the understanding that we are part of a larger whole, that we are embedded in cycles, that we are not separate from nature, but expressions of it. The ancients knew this. They lived it. They built their entire civilizations around it. And when the catastrophe came, when the world ended, some fragment of that wisdom survived. Encoded in myths, in rituals, in monuments. Hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment when we would be ready to see it. And that moment is now. The cycle is turning. The calendar is approaching another inflection point. And we have a choice. We can continue in unconsciousness, repeating the pattern, building our Tower of Babel until it collapses again. Or we can wake up. We can remember. We can align with the cycles rather than fighting them. This is the teaching. This is the inheritance. This is the gift the ancients left for us. Not a prediction, not a warning, but an invitation to remember who we are, to reclaim our place in the cosmic order, to live in harmony with the turning of the wheel. And if we can do that, if we can embody that wisdom, then perhaps we can write a different ending to the story. Or rather, perhaps we can continue the story beyond the ending. Perhaps we can become the civilization that learns, that adapts, that survives not by conquering the cycle, but by dancing with it. This is the hope encoded in the calendars. Not that we will avoid the 0 point, but that we will pass through it consciously. That we will carry the memory across the threshold. That we will emerge on the other side not as amnesiacs, but as elders. Not as survivors scrambling in the ruins, but as stewards, prepared, aware, awake. This is possible. It has always been possible, but it requires something from us. It requires that we stop sleepwalking, that we stop pretending, that we stop denying the cycles and the limits and the patterns. It requires that we remember, and you, listening now, are part of that remembering. You are one of the ones who is waking up, who is seeing the pattern, who is hearing the call. The ancients are speaking through you. The calendar is ticking inside you. The 0 point is approaching within you and around you. And the question is, will you remember? Will you carry the knowledge forward? Will you become the link that does not break? The cycle is depending on it. The future is depending on it. You are depending on it. Remember, there is a practice I want to offer you now. Not a ritual, not a prayer, but a practice. Something you can do, daily, to align yourself with the wisdom of the calendars. To become a conscious participant in the cycle rather than a passive victim of it. Every morning, when you wake, before you check your phone, before you begin the rush of the day, sit for a moment and ask yourself, what is ending today? What needs to die? What am I ready to release? Maybe it is a belief that no longer serves you. Maybe it is a resentment you have been carrying. Maybe it is a fear that has been holding you back. Maybe it is a relationship that has run its course. Maybe it is a version of yourself that you have outgrown. Name it, acknowledge it, and let it go. Let it count down to 0. Let it end. And then ask, what is beginning today? What wants to be born? What is emerging from the 0 point? Maybe it is a new understanding. Maybe it is a creative project. Maybe it is a relationship. Maybe it is a way of being in the world. Maybe it is a version of yourself you have not yet met. Welcome it. Open to it. Allow it to arise. Allow the cycle to turn. Allow the calendar to reset. This is not magical thinking. This is not wishful thinking. This is practical wisdom. This is aligning your personal life with the cosmic rhythm. This is living the calendar rather than just reading it. And as you do this day by day, you will begin to notice something. The endings become less frightening. The beginnings become less overwhelming. The cycle becomes familiar, natural, even comforting, because you are no longer resisting it. You are no longer clinging to the pyramid, trying to make it last forever. You are flowing with the river. You are dancing with the wheel. You are blooming and wilting and blooming again, like the queen of the night. And over time, as the practice deepens, you will begin to recognize something even more profound. The thing that is ending and the thing that is beginning are not separate. They are the same. The death and the birth are one movement. The 0 point is not a gap between them. It is the point where they meet, where they merge, where they are revealed to be one continuous unfolding. You are always ending. You are always beginning. You are always at 0. You are always in the cycle. You are always being destroyed and created, simultaneously, in every moment. This is the truth the calendar is pointing to. Not a truth about the future. A truth about the present. About the eternal now. And when you live from this understanding, when you embody this wisdom, you become free. Free from the fear of death. Free from the anxiety of impermanence. Free from the need to control, to grasp, to hold on. Because you understand that there is nothing to hold on to. Everything is always flowing, always changing, always counting down and resetting. And you are the awareness in which this flow occurs. You are the space in which the cycle turns. You are the 0 point itself. This is liberation. This is enlightenment. This is the promise encoded in the ancient calendars. Not an escape from the cycle, but a full embrace of it. Not a transcendence of time, but a complete immersion in it. Not a denial of death, but a radical acceptance of it. And from that acceptance comes a quality of life that is beyond anything the grasping, fearful mind can imagine. A life of presence, of gratitude, of wonder, of love, of fierce, joyful, undefended participation in the great dance of existence. This is what the ancients knew. This is what they were trying to teach. This is what the calendars, the monuments, the rituals, the myths were all designed to transmit. Not information, transformation. And you are the inheritor of that transmission. You are the one it was meant for. You are the one standing at this particular turning of the wheel, at this particular inflection point, with the opportunity to embody the wisdom and carry it forward. This is not a burden. This is a gift, a calling, an invitation to step into the fullness of your humanity, to become what you were always meant to be, a conscious participant in the cosmic unfolding, a keeper of the cycles, a remember, and as you step into this role, as you take up this practice, something shifts. Not just in you, but in the field, in the collective, in the web of relationships and connections that make up the living fabric of reality. Because you are not separate. Your awakening is not isolated. When you remember, when you align with the cycles, when you count backward without fear, you make it easier for others to do the same. You become a node of coherence in the network, a beacon of possibility, a living demonstration that there is another way, and others will notice. They will be drawn to you even if they cannot articulate why. They will sense something different, something whole, something awake, and they will ask implicitly or explicitly, how? How are you living like that? How are you so present, so undefended, so free? And you will not need to explain. You will not need to proselytize. You will simply live, and your life will be the teaching. Your presence will be the transmission. Your embodiment of the wisdom will speak louder than any words. This is how the knowledge spreads, not through books or lectures or institutions, but through resonance, through the silent transmission from one awakened heart to another, through the web of human connection, one node lighting up and then another until the whole network begins to glow. This is the great work, the only work that truly matters. Not building empires, not accumulating wealth, not achieving status, but waking up, remembering, aligning with the cycles, becoming whole. And when enough of us do this, when enough nodes light up, when the network reaches a critical threshold of coherence, something shifts. Not just individually, but collectively. The culture begins to change. The stories begin to change. The systems begin to change. We begin, as a species, to live differently, more sustainably, more compassionately, more wisely. We begin to count backward not in fear, but in reverence. We begin to honor the cycles. We begin to build a civilization that is in harmony with the turning of the wheel rather than at war with it. This is not utopian fantasy. This is evolutionary potential. This is the next chapter of the human story, waiting to be written. And you are one of the authors. The calendar is in your hands now. The countdown is yours. The reset is yours. What will you do with it? How will you live? How will you bloom? The ancients have passed the torch. The question is, will you carry it? The night is deep. The stars are watching. The cycle is turning. And you are here, awake, aware, ready. Go now, live. Remember, bloom. The countdown continues. But you are no longer counting in fear. You are counting in love. And that changes everything. And so we arrive at the true end, the final word, the last breath before the silence. Learned are never final. They are thresholds, doorways, invitations to begin again. So let this not be an ending. Let it be a turning, a reset, a 0 point from which you step forward into your life with new eyes, new awareness, new reverence for the cycles that hold you. The calendar that counts backward has brought us here, together, through deep time and forgotten civilizations and cosmic rhythms and personal revelation. We have walked through ruins and stood before monuments. We have listened to myths and decoded symbols. We have descended into the underworld and returned with the knowledge. And what is the knowledge? What is the teaching? What is the secret hidden in plain sight, carved into stone, whispered through millennia? Simply this: you are not separate. You are not alone. You are not a random accident in a meaningless universe. You are part of something vast, ancient, sacred, and ongoing. You are a thread in the great tapestry, a note in the eternal song, a breath in the cosmic dance. And the dance has a rhythm, a cycle, turning, and you can resist it or you can surrender to it. You can count forward in denial or you can count backward in wisdom. You can cling to the illusion of permanence or you can embrace the reality of impermanence. The choice is yours. It has always been yours, and it will always be yours. But know this: the ancients are with you, not as ghosts haunting the ruins, but as presence alive in your blood, your bones, your breath. Their wisdom is your inheritance. Their struggle is your struggle. Their hope is your hope. They counted backward so that you could count forward. They remembered so that you could forget and remember again. They built monuments so that when the world ended, when the cycle turned, when the amnesia came, you would find the markers, the breadcrumbs, the way back. And you have found them. You have followed the trail. You have arrived at the center of the labyrinth. And at the center, you have discovered not a monster, but a mirror. Not a secret, but a recognition. Not an answer, but a question that blooms anew in every moment. Who am I? Why am I here? What is this mysterious, terrifying, beautiful experience of being alive? The calendar does not answer these questions. It only holds space for them. It only reminds you that the questions are sacred, that the mystery is the point, that the journey is the destination. And now, as the final words approach, as the countdown reaches its completion, as zero arrives, let me say this: thank you. Thank you for listening, for staying, for walking this long, winding path through the dark, for allowing the words to land, for opening your mind, your heart, your awareness to possibilities beyond the narrow corridors of consensus reality. Thank you for being the one who remembers, who questions, who wonders, who refuses to accept easy answers and comfortable lies, who looks at the ruins and asks, what really happened here? Who looks at the present and asks, what is really happening now? You are the hope. You are the seed. You are the memory that survives the forgetting. You are the 0 point from which the new cycle begins. And wherever you are in this moment, whether you are drifting into sleep or waking into dawn, whether you are alone or surrounded, whether you are at peace or in turmoil, know that you are exactly where you need to be. The calendar has brought you to this moment, this breath, this awareness, and from here you will continue. The cycle will turn. The days will pass. The world will change. And you will carry the knowledge forward. Not as a burden, but as a gift. Not as dogma, but as living wisdom. Not as certainty, but as question. The countdown continues. The calendar resets. The wheel turns. And you turn with it. Not as passenger, but as participant. Not as victim, but as co-creator. Not as the end, but as the beginning. Welcome to the rest of your life. Welcome to the great work. Welcome to the cycle. The ancients are watching. The stars are listening. The earth is breathing. And you are here. Alive. Awake. Aware. This is your time. Your moment. Your chance. Bloom. Reset. Begin again. The calendar that counts backward is now counting forward. And it is counting through you. Go in peace. Go in wonder. Go in love. Until the cycle brings us together again. Until zero comes once more. Until the reset. Goodbye for now. And welcome home.